Good evening, everyone. I am Sagar Chandni, and welcome to Virtual Global Leadership Podcast. It's a pleasure to introduce our esteemed podcast guest for today, Valentina Thorner. Valentina isn't just an expert in her field, she's a true pioneer who is changing the way leaders think about creating policies and engaging employees. With a vast background in leadership and executive roles spanning areas like product, customer support, and remote operations, Valentina truly understands the ins and outs of building effective processes, no matter where your teams may be. Valentina is here to help you transform your policies into a meaningful narrative that aligns with your company's values. This, in turn, allows you and your employees to focus on what truly matters, accomplishing tasks and attracting the right talent. She is also a pro at connecting with, managing, and leading remote teams, proving that you don't need an office to bring your team together for a common goal. Furthermore, Valentina can inspire and empower your team through captivating keynotes on topics like distraction management, productivity, and team management, whether it's in person or virtually. Her insights are incredible value in today's ever changing work environment. So, if you are ready to revolutionize your workplace policies, engage your employees, and lead your team to success, you have come to the right place. Tune into our podcast episode to tap into the wealth of wisdom and experience that Valentina brings to the table. Welcome, Valentina. How are you?
Thank you very much for having me. I'm great. This was such an impressive introduction. I'm very impressed with myself.
Thank you. You're most welcome, Valentina. The first question that I have for you on, like, what are your thoughts on why it's important for leaders of remote teams to actually get out of survival mode?
Uh, so for a lot of remote leaders, actually, they became remote leaders during or after the pandemic without ever having had any good examples or role models. Because even if you're not a new leader and you were a leader already before the pandemic, you very likely had really good in-person leaders, or hopefully you had really good in-person leaders. So that means you have somebody that you can kind of emulate, that you can copy, and you're like, okay, I'm going to do it like this person who led me in my 20s, or I'm definitely going to not going to do what this other person did. But in a remote environment, suddenly all of these skills that you picked up, they don't really help anymore, or they only help a little bit. And so you feel kind of lost. And for a lot of leaders, they end up in this new position. They were put into this position because they were really great individual contributors, and now they are supposed to suddenly be able to lead, and they don't even see the people that they lead. So it's very difficult to navigate that without having a clear framework. And what very often happens is that either they end up worried, like, I have no idea what my team is doing, or I don't know who's on my team, or I don't know how they are doing their work. And it becomes this huge kind of cloud of problems where you don't know where to start. And then is when survival mode kicks in, because you're just trying to get through the day. You're just trying to kind of mitigate the fires that you're seeing popping up here and there. And you lose the sight of the forest because you're only basically focusing on the little like scrub in front of you.
Yes, yes. Thank you for sharing that perspective. You mentioned a very important point on the framework, right? So, what are some of the frameworks one can look at while they're crafting their strategy to build teams?
Mhm. So there, of course, there is a lot of great now, let's say open source or open frameworks out there, playbooks out there. So if you look at like GitLab or Automatic or Buffer, a lot of these companies have actually put their guides out there as to how it works for them. Now, one of the problems with these examples is that they might not be one on one transferable to your company's reality, because very likely you have different rules in place. So until very recently, I usually told people, like, read all the playbooks that are out there, distill what works for you, and create your own leadership playbook, your own leadership style. But that's a lot of work, and it's a lot of work for when you don't know how long you're going to actually be in this company or in this position where you're right now. So what I did is I looked into all the different kind of skills that you need to be a remote leader. I did research into what's investigations and university have found out about how leadership changes when you get into a remote environment, and distilled it down into a framework where we have 5 different areas, and each of these areas have specific skills. And that allows you as a leader to self-assess yourself and see, where am I really good at and where am I missing something? And the thing is, if you're missing something, and you know that you're missing that skill, then you can either learn it, improve on it, or you can find somebody who can do it for you. But if you don't have the awareness, you're basically flying blind. And on the flip side, if you know that you're really good at something, you can actively make this your secret sauce. You can make this the distinguished part of your leadership experience, of what you can contribute to the team. And by having a very simple framework where you can basically self-assess yourself every 6 months or every year or something, you kind of get a feeling for where you are going, and you can actively steer your career as a leader towards where you want to go, instead of just going with where the wind blows you.
So what are some of the interesting findings in your research? You would like to share in terms of skills remote leaders must focus on.
So the areas are team management, team direction, personal productivity, communication skills, and social skills. And the one skill that everybody always very much underperforms on is distraction management. And it's
Ah,
also like it's one of the things that I talk about a lot, because in order for us to be productive and to focus, we need to solve for distraction first. Like,
mhm.
you can put as many Pomodoro techniques into your life. If something is going on next to you in the same room, you're not going to be able to focus. And distractions in an office are a little bit easier to be managed, simply because they are managed at scale. You put everybody in the room and you already have the distractions of the unloaded dishwasher or the child running screaming through the room. You've already solved for that. There are, of course, still distractions. That's why people wear those noise canceling headphones, but it's a little bit more under control. Now, when as a company you send everybody home, or to a co-working, or to work from anywhere, suddenly you cannot, as a company, organize this distraction management anymore, and it becomes something that every individual person has to do. As a leader, you now have the double role of, you need to manage your own distractions, you need to role model how to manage those distractions, and you need to help your team to manage those distractions. And that is something that you've probably not learned anywhere, because it was never needed before.
Mhm, mhm. So what are some of the baby steps or first steps one must take to manage the distraction? You rightly said, it actually is not only in the work that we are doing, but otherwise also human beings are now distracted anyway. So what
All
are
the
some of the
time,
steps?
yeah.
Yeah.
The easiest step is, give your phone a home outside from where you work, which is
Hmm.
harder than it sounds. And actually, if you're using a lot of two-factor authentications, it's even impractical sometimes. But I mean,
Yeah.
there are solutions for that you can put on your computer. Um, but so the thing is, first you need to figure out what are the things that distract you, because there are 2 types of distraction. There's internal distractions and there's external distractions. External distractions, like the neighbor redoing their kitchen and like making a lot of noise, that is completely external, and you can probably only solve that through working while they are taking a break, or moving your workplace to a different part of the flat. But it's something that is outside yourself. And then we have internal distractions that are it's basically you ruminating about things, you distracting yourself. All of us who have ADHD or are ADHD adjacent, it's very easy to get distracted by, oh, the squirrel. And these if you combine this with all the things that you know you should be doing but you didn't get to it, etc., it becomes this kind of hurricane in your brain that doesn't let you focus, because you are trying to figure out what you should be focusing on in the first step. So the 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 crux is basically, what is it that is distracting me, and what can I do to either make the distraction go away, have somebody else deal with the distraction, dishwasher is an option, or put it into a later time frame.
Mm-hmm.
For
Mm-hmm.
example, and this is a very personal example, my father passed last year, and so I was distracted by grief. And I actually put into my calendar, every week I had an hour in my calendar that said crying, be sad, and grieving.
Mm-hmm.
And this is not something that will work for everyone, but for me, this was a way to actually say, okay, now I'm like, I feel this emotion very intensely, but actually I want to focus on this other thing. So I'm actually acknowledging the emotion. It is part of my experience, part of my reality, and also it does not serve me now, but that doesn't mean that it's not valid. So I'm going to do this on Thursday afternoon between 3 and 4 o'clock, but then I'm going to do it with like all my strength because I'm going to focus on this. It doesn't always work. It works more often than not in my case. And the interesting part here is as well, we are all different. And there are many, many ways that we can solve for distractions, and not all of them will work for everyone, but
Mm-hmm.
some of them will work for everyone. So you need to find the ways that work for you. And that very likely requires a lot of experiments.
Yep. Yep. Yeah. I'm also experimenting one right now. There is a website called as habitstrong.com.
Uh-huh.
So what we are doing is in the morning 5 to 6 a.m. we get on a call and we meditate, and then from 10 a.m. to 12 a.m. everyone, they are part of various teams, they join in, and we do a 2 minutes of 2 50 minutes, two sprints of 50 minutes of
Uh-huh.
work, and then we go out. So that's
Oh, okay.
this is something I just thought I should share. This is something that is
Mm-hmm.
happening here. So yeah, but yeah, I understand when you say that, it is different for everyone, and everyone has to take that effort to find out what works for them. So
Exactly.
thank you, Valentina, for sharing that. Now coming to a topic which is, very much in the news, that people are being asked to, or people are rather being forced to go back to the office. Why that is not the right solution, or is this the right solution? Like the remote teams are pushed. So can you share your thoughts there?
It's a very big and very nuanced topic. And I think, as usual, the media doesn't really do it the justice that it gets. So, should your team go back to the office or should it stay fully remote? That very much depends on you. Like, if you are a company owner and you want to have your team in the office, maybe even because you feel powerful if you see that there's 30, 70, 80 people with you in the office. If it's your company, if this is your creation, by all means, go back to the office. You're going to leave, like you're going to lose the people that don't want to go or can't go to an office, but you are certainly going to attract people who actually like to go to the office. So I
Mhm.
think where we are going in the longer run is there will be companies who are fully remote. There will be companies who are remote only in one country, companies who are remote in one city, and you what they now call hybrid. You go to the office like 2 times per week, and people will hopefully be able to self-select what type of work works best for them, because this also has something to do from an individual point of view with the season of your life where you're in. When you're 20, 25, 30, maybe you don't have any kids, you live in a vibrant city, you maybe love to go to the office because you end up being friends with lots of people in the office. And then you go to after work coffee, and then you go to after work beers, and then you go after work bowling, and then you go after work karaoke or whatever people do nowadays. Now,
Mhm.
and I'm in my 40s and I have two 7-year-old kids. Like, if I see in a job description that they have Friday afternoon beers, I'm like, sorry. I know that I'm not a fit for this company because I'm certainly not going to use my Friday afternoon with beers and then trying to find a babysitter for my kids so that they are taken care of. So for me at this point in my life, actually a job where I have the flexibility to bring the kids to school and pick them up is a lot more important. And so as a company, you have to decide what is the type of people that I want to attract, what is the type of people that I want to have in my company, and what is the diversity that I want to have in my company. And now we all know that diversity actually increases output, increases innovation, is actually financially makes sense for a company. What we don't talk about that much is diversity is also a lot of work. It
Mhm.
requires a lot of candid conversations. It comes with a lot of differences in opinion, and differences in opinion do not necessarily contribute to harmony, because if we have different opinions, we have to discuss these opinions and we have to come to a solution. That solution will probably be better if we both started with the same opinion. But it's work, and some people do not enjoy diversity because of the waves that comes into it.
Yeah,
So
yeah,
this is very unpopular, but if this is your company, I might disagree with you that you only want the in-office party environment, but it's your prerogative. You do you, your company, your decision. I would
mm,
not like I would never work with you on that case. But it's
mhm,
fine. And I think what I'm really missing in the whole discussion on the social media, it's like, oh, return to office, oh, remote only. Like it's so instead of just saying, hey, I understand. Well, maybe I don't even understand that you want have to have everybody back in your office. But if this is your decision, you have the right to make that decision, and you also have the then to live with the consequences that you're probably going to like lose some of your highest performers. Now, what I do not agree with is companies who say we are remote now, remote first, and then they get a new CEO, and then that CEO says, and now you have to come back to the office because I say so, because that is a breach of your responsibility of care. People
mm,
may have sold their cars, may have sold their houses, may have moved to different because they trusted that this was a remote role, and then it suddenly wasn't. And I think that is a clear breach of trust, and that's really kind of that should not happen. But if you are building your own company and you really want to return to office because you have always been in office and you're super happy that you now can be back in office, just make sure that the transition is so that the people who can't go to the office have the opportunity to actually leave on good terms, because we often meet each other twice in life, uh, and so that later when you need to go remote again, you can tap into that potential again.
wow, that's a wonderful perspective. I have a quick question here, Valentina. Like, there are companies, be it in several sectors, which can potentially go remote,
Hmm.
and some which cannot go remote. So, do you believe that there is a clear distinction, or it is like more than, let's say, 70% of the organizations can go remote? Like, just wanting your perspective here.
So you can go remote if so you can go fully remote if people need things that they can take with them. Which,
Hmm.
if I
Okay.
mean, the obvious thing is the tech industry where you need your computer and a stable internet access. Like you can just go home. But for example, one of my brothers is an electrical engineer and he works in a lab, and he can't go fully remote because like he can't take the lab with him. It's
Yeah.
too big. But
Yeah.
he can go what they now call hybrid. He works from home 3 times a week because he doesn't need to be in the lab all the time. He just needs to be in the lab some of the time. And I
Mhm.
think that already adds a flexibility to his life and to his engagement with his family that is very, very different to back before the pandemic, when he actually had to go to the office or to the building 5 times a week, even though he would only go into the lab twice a week. So I think it's not like either or. So it's more like you have to look at the position, look what this person actually work with, what they need. And as technology evolves, so the same position my brother has now, 10 years ago, you had to be in the lab full time, but now a lot of things in the lab are automated, so you actually don't need to be there all the time. So job functions also evolve. So just because you can't be fully remote today doesn't necessarily mean that you can't be fully remote, I don't know, 5 years from now. But it's really something that from an operations perspective, the company needs to look into and say, okay, this person can be remote. This person, we need you in the office twice per week because there is a real need for it, and not just because the CEO said so. Because that's a huge difference.
Yeah.
And
Yeah.
while I'm sorry, you have to come, or not even I'm sorry, but look, the type of work that you're doing requires you to be here 5 times a week, and people who work in professions where you have to be somewhere, I mean, they understand that they have to be there
Yeah.
because it's part of their ones. Like, for example, if you are a costume designer at the opera, y- the costumes are usually so you can't just take them home, because like how would you do that? So you kind of understand that this is something that you have to go to every day and do your work there in situ, because you might not be the only one working on whatever you're working on, etc. But it's really, it depends on the type of work. And of course, the media is mostly talking about white collar tech workers who don't really have any attachment, let's say, to a specific place. But you're very right. That's not the only type of people who work in this world.
Yeah, yeah. Thank you, Valentina. Circling back conversation from a leadership point of view, like how can leaders create a leadership development roadmap for themselves as well as their remote teams?
Mm, so I would, like, in that case, and if we can put this into the show notes, like go to remotethatworks.com/radar and download the the leadership radar, and self-assess yourself,
Wow.
mostly so that you understand where you stand. And then you have those 50 different categories. You assess yourself, and then you'll see, oh, here are 3 categories in that I'm really, really good at, and here is one, probably distraction management, where I'm really, really bad in. How can I work on this? And then I usually, when I work with people one-on-one, I combine this with an exercise about core values, because very often you realize that there are 3, 4, or 5 things that you would like to work on. So in order to kind of prioritize, it helps to understand your own core values a little bit better, so that you then can say, okay, I see that my distraction management is improvable. I'm not great at documentation skills, which means that most things live in my head, and that's probably not really good for my team either. And persuasion, like I'm not really good in bringing others on board with the things that they should be doing from like a purely persuasion point of view. And then I look at what I need in my day to day and how my day to day looks like. And actually, I realize, okay, distraction management, I've made it this far. So even though I'm not really happy with my distraction management, the persuasion part is probably the one that's going to have a bigger impact on my and my team's impact on the company. So I'm going to focus on this first. And that's how you create a roadmap. You assess where you stand, you see what you want to improve, and then you kind of prioritize where you want to focus on first. And you don't even have to focus first on the things that you score very low on, because if you feel you're kind of, I mean, you're coming, it's not amazing, but I mean, you are doing kind of the best you can also focus on the things that you're really good in. Let's say you're really, really good at pushing your team to like ever higher heights in terms of collaboration and working with other teams.
Hmm.
If you're
Yeah.
already good at this, see if you can understand why you are so good at this. What is it that makes the secret sauce for you, and hone in on this, so that you kind of become the super collaboration accelerator in your company,
Yeah. Yeah.
which can also like kind of set you apart as somebody that, oh, if we need to have a project where we need to organize these different departments, we're definitely coming to you, because we know that you are a super collaborator. So
Yeah.
that's like the self-awareness is always the first step, so that you know where you need to improve and where you want to improve.
Yeah. While you were sharing this example, I thought you were actually talking about me. So, Valentina, I would love to know more from you on some of the strategies on identifying specific needs of individual team members in a remote setting.
Mhm. Well, first you
How
can
can
ask them,
leaders identify that? Yeah.
which is a very underrated tool.
Yeah.
I'm always surprised. So, if you are a remote leader, and now I'm speaking to every single person who's listening to this, have your weekly one on ones, maybe two
Hmm.
weekly, but like speak to your people, talk to them. And more than even that, listen to them. This is one of the most important things that you can do in your leadership journey. Not just once every 3 months, not just once a year, and not just talking about performance, but actually talking about life, understanding them as a person, understanding what's going on in their life. And I know this sounds very soft, skilly, wishy washy, but I'm not their mom. Why should I be interested? You should be
Hmm.
interested because you are you're interested in their work performance, and everybody's work performance is very much influenced by what happens outside of their work performance, because
Hmm.
this whole work-life differentiation does not exist. If
Hmm.
your dog died, this will affect your work.
Hmm.
If your daughter got selected to get into Harvard, this will affect your work. Like in the positive or in the negative. Like some people, myself included, work with grief in terms of pouring all our energy into work because it helps us to think about something different. And some people completely withdraw. But you as a manager, you need to understand what's going on in your people's life. And in these one-on-one meetings, like I recommend weekly or bi-weekly. If they're very senior, maybe bi-weekly. Half an hour, 45 minutes. You don't need to like dedicate your entire day to that. Though if you have a team, you probably want to use a day to have a one-on-one with all of them. And then talk about, are there any things that you need help with? What is currently the thing that is on your mind most? And that can be work related, but it can also be totally unwork related. Where are the things where you struggle with most? So for example, I had a person reporting to me, he was always completely overwhelmed because he had a really hard time saying no. So whenever somebody would ask something of him, and that included customer who wanted custom code, he would always say yes, work extra hours, and like try to make everything work for everyone. So at some point, I
Hmm.
realized that he was also always stressed, and I also realized that he worked more hours than he should have been working, which is something that you as a leader have to actually look out for, because most people actually work more than they should be
Yeah.
working.
Yeah.
So we sat down and we realized the problem was him overcommitting to everything. So we used our next, I think, 12 one-on-ones to read a book that was called The Power of No.
Wow.
So he would read one chapter. I would skim that chapter, and then we would talk about that chapter and think about how can we use. And it was a very practical book with like very clear strategies. And so we would talk about one chapter every 2 weeks. And in these 2 weeks, he would then try to use the things in those chapters and
Yeah.
experiment with them, so that we would find a way that he could say no that works for him. Because that's the thing, with nothing in life there's a blueprint that will work for everyone. So we actually went through the entire book and tried all of the things that were in there until we found the 2 or 3 strategies that worked for him. And that is
Hmm.
also something that you can do in one-on-ones, because at the end of the day, it's your responsibility to help your team members develop into better, not just team members, but better human beings who can do their work better and who can do it with joy. Like, you don't want people who are just surviving on your team either.
Mm-hmm.
Their
Mm-hmm.
job
So
doesn't need to be their all and everything, but it should be like a modicum of being enjoyable.
yeah, yeah. Thank you, Valentina, for sharing a personal example. There's a one quick question I have for you here is there are, let's say, people who are showing that they are leaders, and then there is a difference between showing and being. So what are your suggestions for leaders? Unfortunately, sometimes even they don't realize that they are just showing that they are leaders, and this could be not with respect to even let's say remote, but in general, but then it has its impact when they're leading teams remotely. So what's your perspective and your take on this?
So just to make sure that I understand correctly,
Yeah,
so people who talk a lot about how it is to be a leader, but who actually don't really then show up and help
they
their team to do the
Yes,
things that they
yes.
want them
They
to.
are actually, let's say, leading remote teams, and they're busy showing that they are leaders, but they're not being. So just thought, how they can work on themselves. Yeah.
So basically, usually these people score very high on persuasion, on inspiration, on others, and on relationship management.
Hmm.
Because even though, so it sounds like something negative, and it definitely just saying that you're doing things but then not doing them is probably not how you should do leadership. But we also have to acknowledge that they have a gift for communication.
Hmm. Hmm.
and they
Yeah.
should use that gift for communication. Now, the question is, how can they switch from just communicating into actually also making an impact? And very likely, like one of the things is, for example, starting from communication, going into documenting their knowledge so it's accessible for everyone, even when they're not listening to them, and then connecting better with the individual team members to figure out what those team members actually need. But here, one of the things that happens a lot is you can figure out that you're scoring low or that you need to improve something. It does not mean that you necessarily want to improve it.
Mm-hmm.
So if
Mm-hmm.
you as a team lead can get away with just talking about leading, but without actually doing the work, something needs to happen for you to really want to change that. Because for me, it looks like a very comfortable position. And at the end of the day, most of us are also motivated by what is in for me. So unless that person realizes, oh, I will be stuck at this level if I don't actually manage to change my outlook, they are probably not, or because the company says, hey, like this looks like a smokescreen, but like your team is complaining. So it will
Mm-hmm.
be very difficult to change that. So I guess what I'm saying is the easiest way is like the team needs to stand up and say, hey, you are not the leader that we need. Like we need this to happen because otherwise we don't know how to work. And that actually ties in with the fact that remote employees need to say what, like, need to be advocates for their own needs.
Mm-hmm.
Because, and that is something that's very different if difficult if you're coming from an office environment. Because if I go into the office and I look like I didn't sleep, and it's the third day in a row that I look like I didn't sleep, and I seem to be, somebody is going to ask, hey, what's going on? Like it's somebody is going to realize that something's wrong. And of course, in an online environment, that doesn't necessarily happen because no one's going to realize that you didn't sleep unless you say that you didn't
Hmm.
sleep.
Yeah.
And that's actually something that everybody who's working remotely needs to practice, is this whole, we call it vulnerability, but it's basically just showing how you feel, how you are at the moment, what is going on in your life without somebody asking you for it. Because if we only ever wait for others to give us permission to share what we need or to share what we want, we are going to be stuck in the same place for a very, very, very long time.
Mm-hmm. So,
So
so,
if
so, yeah, yeah. Please
so
complete your point.
so if you have a team lead who's just all smokes and not consistent, like doing, like tell them, hey, I need you to come to my one-on-one prepared. I need you to actually review what we talked about last week because I feel like we're spinning our wheels and I'm telling you the same thing over and over again. Because you
Hmm.
can expect leadership.
Hmm. 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 So also, Valentina, what I learn from you, what I'm learning from you right now is that apart from the core expertise, I think it seems very important for leaders to have those human, let's say, resource skills or emotional intelligence skills, or they have to, I think, start consuming more information on developing
Hmm.
these areas as well. Am I correct
Yeah,
in identifying that?
absolutely. Absolutely. Leadership is a human skill,
Yeah.
and it
Yeah.
it requires humanity, because at the end of the day, humans connect with humans.
Yeah.
And we are social creatures, so we
Yeah.
actually need that connection. In an office, you get that by default because you are around people. But in a remote environment, leaders are the ones who actually set the standard for how much human connectivity there will be. So they, as a leader, you need, if you are not naturally empathetic, or if you've never learned how to be empathetic, that is something that you need to learn. You need to learn how to actively listen.
Yeah,
Like,
absolutely. Absolutely.
and those,
Yeah.
there's a lot of books, there are courses around this, like those are learnable skills. Like that's the thing, they are learnable skills. Unfortunately, at this place in time, they still sound more like sound more unsexy than learning Python or uh,
Yeah.
talking to ChatGPT, but they are intrinsically important for being a good remote leader. You need to be a human, you need to show that you're a human, and you need to connect with other humans.
So actually, World Economic Forum had released a list of top 20 or 25 skills, and
Mm,
if I'm not wrong, around about 10 plus skills were the softer skills, more than
yeah,
10, and it
yeah,
included, as you rightly said, leadership, persuasion, negotiation,
yeah.
emotional intelligence. So yeah, thank you for bringing that up. So Valentina, when you work with leaders, what are some of the insecurities that you find, they are, let's say, trying to solve for? The reason why I'm asking you this question is, let's say a scenario, a team, usually a team, if they want to, let's say, move up the ladder, they are, let's say, busy in doing their work, managing their work, and then they are also in a way proving to their leaders, right? But for
Hmm.
leaders, of course, it's more about getting the targets. They also have to move up the ladder in their organization. So how do one manage that, and how do one identify that, okay, these are the insecurities or your observations, and how do you help them then?
One of the biggest insecurities seems to be that a lot of leaders don't really know what's expected of them. I mean, they get the team, and the team has kind of goals, but then it's not clear what they like. Are they responsible for those goals? Is there anything else that they should be doing? How does leadership actually look like? So like this insecurity about, am I doing the right thing? Because very often, especially middle managers, they don't get any feedback. Like they don't necessarily get feedback from their own team, and they don't get feedback from above because the person above them has no idea what they're doing anyway. So there is kind of this vacuum of feedback. And if you're alone in your home or in your co-working or whatever, it's very easy to very quickly feel like, oh my God, they're going to fire me tomorrow because somebody's going to figure out that I have no idea what I'm doing here. Even though you are doing a very good job, because you
Yeah.
don't get recognition for the job that you are doing.
Hmm. Yeah.
So this whole, do they know I exist? Am I doing the right thing? Like that's one insecurity, and the other insecurity is very much around, I'm lonely. I don't know who to talk to. Like I don't have any direct peers that I can hang out with because I don't know them. The company has
Hmm.
set this up in a way that we're all competing. So like I can't really vent to my team because they're my team. I can't really vent to my boss because they don't understand me. There's no one on my level, and HR is completely overwhelmed. So I'm eating all of this frustration into myself and then end up being kind of unhappy just because of the social isolation. And social isolation is a real thing in remote companies who do not actively solve for human connectivity, and not many don't.
Yeah, yeah, I can relate to this because I've been into this feedback loop crisis that you just mentioned. So what
Yeah.
are some of the steps uh, those leaders, those middle managers must take? Like, it's very easy for a, a group of, let's say, a peer to share feedback with one another, but
Mm.
then how can leader invite or build something so that, build a process where the team members give them feedback? So
Yeah.
what can
So
be done here?
so one thing that like that I tell especially young women very soon is, your career is your responsibility. Even if the company you work with has like a career development process or something, and some nowadays some have that, like career progression programs, etc., some don't. Your career is your responsibility. If you want to grow, you need to create those growth opportunities. If you need feedback, you need to ask for feedback. And actually, don't ask for feedback, ask for advice. Because if you ask somebody, hey, can you give me some feedback about the last 3 months, for example, people usually freeze up because it's like, good job, which is something that you can't do anything with.
Yeah,
So
yeah, yeah.
instead, tell them, hey, the last 3 months I have been working on, let's say, improving my presentation skills. So I know that you have seen 4 or 5 of my presentations. Can you give me some advice on how I can make them more memorable?
Hmm.
But like asking for very specific advice, and especially the higher you get, senior leaders love to give advice. Everybody actually loves to give advice. And
Yeah.
so ask for that advice, because you don't just want people to tell you that you're great. I mean, it's nice when people tell you that you're doing a good job and that you're really amazing, etc., but it doesn't really help you to change anything. So if you're looking for career development and for developing skills that you really need, ask for advice.
So true. So true. Thank you. Thank you for sharing that. Also, on that note, I would love to know your perspective on some of the communication strategies remote leaders must look at while they are designing, let's say, a year-long strategy.
Mm-mm. Communication is something like you can design all you want, but then it's the reality that takes over. So basically, the only thing that you can really design is kind of the framework, and then be an example, and like really call out when people don't follow the example. So in the remote work, what we get a lot is the whole meetings versus asynchronous
Hmm.
communication debate. As usual, I'm somewhere in the middle. I don't think it is healthy to be in meetings 8 hours a day. I also don't think it's healthy never to have any meetings.
Yep.
I mean,
Yep.
for some people are so introverted and have such a full social life outside of work that maybe they don't need that. But most people, especially those who came to remote work through the pandemic, so they did not choose remote work because of because they like remote, but rather because they like their lives and want a job that actually slots in with life. So remote is the logical solution there. So that means they need a little bit more connection and like real time connection. So when it comes to should we go asynchronous or should we go via meetings, the question is, can you organize work, like the work, the things that the task, etc., in a way that you can check on the content asynchronously, and then can you use meetings to actually create those bonding experience or those discussions, because if you're a diverse company, you need those in-person discussions
Yep. Yep.
in combination with written or async discussions, but you need like the talking to each other so that we don't forget that there's a person behind that avatar. So and that's what meetings are for, to create this connection. So what I usually recommend is, if you like, create pathways for work related communication, and also create pathways in parallel for non-work communication. For example, in Slack, it can be as easy as having thousands of Slack channels, which sounds
Yep.
very intimidating, but you can have a Slack channel for crochet, one for hiking, one for running, one for parenting toddlers, one for like, whenever somebody feels the need that they need to talk about a topic, have them create a channel for this. Those channels will be very quiet. They will flare up from time to time because people have a need to talk about something, and then will go quiet again. But that way you don't disrupt the entire company in the general question, just channel, just because you just made a cute picture of your cat. But you put that into the pets channel, and then you will basically only disrupt the people who actually want to see that picture. And this runs in parallel to the work discussions, which means you don't have crossover that much. So you don't have crossover of communication, but you do have crossover of people based on interest.
Hmm.
But it doesn't
Interesting.
happen just because. It happens because you designed for it.
Yes. 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 Thank you, Valentina, for sharing that. What are your thoughts on handling unique challenges of cross-cultural leadership in a remote team?
Do you think those are unique? I think
Uh,
nowadays they are everywhere.
yeah, that are common. Yeah.
Yeah. So it's a very interesting question, because how do you define cross-cultural? I mean, now in our conversation, it's very obvious. Like, I'm German living in Spain, you're in India, you live in India as well. So like there's
Yeah.
clearly a big cultural difference, not because of the countries, but because of the realities that we both grew up in. And I think
Yes.
acknowledging that these differences exist is already a first step. Then I use the culture map very, very liberal in all my
Wow.
trainings, which actually allows you to kind of rate each other's, and then figure out, for example, I am probably a little bit more direct than you are. But that doesn't
Hmm.
mean, it's not because Germans are direct in general, but because my upbringing and going to a German school where discussions are very much like encouraged, etc., has made me more prone to being direct. So I'm probably more direct than you, but I'm probably a lot less direct than my friend who went to Dutch education,
Yeah.
which is
Yeah.
who are even more direct. So just by being very clear about these differences that come from basically the cultural imprint that we have, and that is completely, it's not bad or good, or one is better or worse than the other, but it's just how we operate in work settings, and then knowing that we can adjust for it. For example, I had a teammate from Vietnam, and when it came to directness, we were very much on opposite spectrums, but we
Yeah.
both talked about this, and I made a conscious effort to be less direct, and she made a conscious effort to me to be a little bit more directive, so that we could get a little bit closer, and whenever we had misunderstandings, we would actually go back to our culture map cooperation and say, oh, this probably happened because I took for granted this, but you thought this. And
Hmm.
that's the same thing with diversity. It require you need to do a lot more meta communication,
Yep.
because
Yep.
very often disagreements don't even stem from the question you're talking about, but how you are talking about the question.
Yes. Yes. It is actually said, no, there is a saying, it's 70% how you say it and
Yeah,
30% what you say. Yeah.
yeah. And that also depends on the culture, because in some cultures, actually 70% of what you said. What is
Oh,
in my own experience, because in German business culture, what you usually do, you start with the premise, and then how you got to the result, and then at the very end you present your outcome. This is how every single paper in school is written. That's how papers at university is written. This is what drilled to it. You put your assumption, you put how you got there, and then you put your shiny new gadget that you want your funding for. Now in US, it's exactly the other way around. You'd say that's the gadget, and then you explain how you got there. So that
hmm.
means, in very practical terms, when I do proposals, I actually flip the order of the slides when I talk to an American audience compared to when I talk to a European audience,
Wow. Wow.
because it's just more natural for them. Is that better? Is that worse? No, one thing works in one place and the other works in the other place, and you just need to be able to adjust. But that again comes with awareness. So the Culture Map by Erin Myers, it's an amazing book, and she has the tools online to kind of map yourself.
Thank you. Thank you for sharing that resource and your example. What are more some of the significant changes you have observed in remote leadership in recent years?
Oh, most people who are now remote leaders have no ideas how to be remote leaders, because they never had any examples. So that's the
Mm.
thing. Like, for example, like I have been working and leading remotely for over a decade. So I have had really good remote leaders. I have had really bad remote leaders. And I have been working with remote leaders for a long time, which means I've seen lots of examples, and I can draw on these examples whenever I find a new situation. Now, if you have worked in an office in your entire life, and then you have been now suddenly remote for the past 3 years, you have exactly 3 years of experience with leaders who probably also didn't have any experience. So you are
Hmm.
all trying to reinvent the wheel, copying from somebody who's also reinventing the wheel, and then complaining that it's not working. Like, of course it's not working, because most remote leaders don't really know what they are doing. Like when I see teams that do not ever have any one-on-ones nor any team meetings, and then they're confused that everybody works into a different direction. It's like you never sync up. You don't know what other people are working on. Or when people like, who's on your team? Oh, I don't know. I think there's like 6, 7, and they're like, what? I kind of expect you to be able to tell me the names of the people on your team and what they're working on, like now, and not
Yeah.
because you first have to do an hour of research. So, like, that is one of the biggest, and it's not the fault of the people who became leaders during the pandemic, because, like, how would they know? If you now put me in charge of a, I don't know, bakery, I wouldn't know how to run a bakery. I've never worked in a bakery. I've never worked with anyone in a bakery. So I know how to bake bread, but like that's it. And that's because of the pandemic. So basically, how do you learn how to be a good remote lead? And unfortunately, most companies do not invest into teaching their leaders how to lead. Not even in office, but at least in office, you have examples that you can use. But now in a remote environment, you don't even have those examples. And that is the biggest challenge for leaders, figuring out how to work remote, how to lead remotely on their own.
Mhm. So here, like, then what are some of the metrics leaders or leadership team must look at whether we are creating a right remote environment, irrespective of the the products or services they have for
Mhm.
various clients. Yeah.
So this actually this requires kind of the for the entire leader team to sit down and think about what is the type of remote environment that we want, because there is no one size fits all, and it very much depends on where your team is based. It depends on how your team is spaced over the globe. You will have to have very different communication practices if everybody's in the same time zone compared to when you're combining people from Los Angeles, Sydney, and London, because there will be no meeting between these three people where everyone is awake at least.
Yeah.
So that influences quite a bit. And then what is it that what is your core value as a company? What are the things that you deem important?
Hmm.
And
Hmm.
then you have to work from there. And what is it that you want to make possible? And here I always tell people to use the two dimensions. One is location, like where are you located, how close are you located, but the other part is how flexible are your work times, because even if you and me are working in the same time zone, but let's say you work from, because now I know you are an early riser, you would never get me out of bed at 5 to meditate. You would probably, like, I don't know, work from 7 to like early afternoon, while I would be working like from 10 to later in the afternoon. So that means we have a smaller overlap than if we were in the office from 9 to 5 both at the same time. So it's kind of, you need to look at the how does work happen now? Are we happy with how work happens now? And what is it that we want to change? And when it comes to KPIs, of course, you have the ENPS, the Employee Net Promoter Score, where you basically ask people, would you recommend others working here? Which, in which case, I strongly recommend to not only ask that question, but also get a little bit of information about how long has the people been in the company, gender, and location if you're hybrid. Like, do they have access to the office or do they not have access there? So that you can disaggregate the data, because otherwise you'll end up with a like mushy data where the majority basically drowns out the voices of the people who would never recommend you. Because let's say you have 100 people and 20 people say they would not recommend your company. Okay, not great, but we'll live with it. But if you know that these 20 people are the people that are fully remote while everybody else has access to the hub, then suddenly it's a big problem, because now it's like 100% of your fully remote people that are unhappy. So kind of look into these data and then drill down enough that it's still anonymous, but so that you can actually then shape policies around that. And then the other thing is clarity of communication. Everybody in the company needs to be absolutely clear about what remote means for your company, because remote is like, yeah, we're serving food in this restaurant, thanks for the information.
Thank you, Valentina, for sharing that. Now, a bit about you. What is motivating you or inspiring you to be or stay committed to this path? Like, how do you, get your creative juices flowing?
ChatGPT? Usually, no, seriously, ask ChatGPT what is the general opinion on XYZ, and then I already know that I have a different opinion. That really helps with creativity. No, but like what really motivates me is I have kids and I want them to be able to shape their work life around what works for them. I want them
Hmm.
to have options, and I want it to be easy to find those job options. And when it
Hmm.
comes to job search, for example, everybody and their mother now says that they are remote or remote first. And then you have to dig really deep to figure out what that actually means. But I don't want, and it would be really nice if everybody would just communicate how work works before somebody sends in their CV, which is not happening at the moment in most of the instances. So I basically want to leave a better work world for those who come after me, because I know that I'm very, very privileged that I have been working remotely for most of my career, actually. And I ended up in remote work more or less by accident. Like, I didn't choose it, it just happened that where I worked, the office closed down, and then, well, I mean, that's what we're doing now, and it worked out well for me. But I would like there to be more choice around it, more choice on how we open up our lives, because at the end of the day, remote work, it's not about making work more intelligent. It also means we can have a lot more connection to where we live,
Hmm.
because it
Hmm.
opens up time and opportunity to actually connect with the community where we live in. It allows people to get to wherever they feel they want their community to have. So if you want to live in a village, nothing for me, but I know that people really thrive in villages. They can go to a village and live
Yeah.
in that village. And so wherever you are with remote work, you don't have to move away because of the work, unless you want to move away because you feel that gives you a different perspective, which can also be very enlightening. But like
Yes.
now, I can create a community. For example, me and my neighbors, our doors are always open, and our kids go back and forth between the two flats and see it basically as one thing. We are creating a community here, and that only works because their parents and me, we both work from home, so there's always someone there. And creating this community where we are, going out and meeting people where we are, I think that's one of the biggest advantages of remote work, because those 1.5, 2 hours that before you were sitting alone in a car, I mean, for all I love podcasts, you can do better things with those
Yeah.
hour and a half. You can go
Yeah.
to the gym, absolutely, but you can also invest in the community where we live. And I think that is where the future lives, because we are social beings. We need to be around people. And now we can actually choose around which people we want to be.
Thank you, Valentina, for sharing a deeper perspective here. And if any of the viewers would like to connect with you, how can they reach out to you?
I'm pretty active here on LinkedIn. Also, until my daughter comes of age, I'm the only Valentina Turner here on LinkedIn. So easy to find. Look for the tiara, and then you got the right one. You can also find me on remotethatworks.com. That's where you can download the Remote Leadership Radar and find information about how to work with me. Yeah, but LinkedIn is probably the easiest way to get hold of me.
Yeah. Thank you, Valentina. It never felt. I think we are already 1 hour into the conversation, and I have so many
Oh, wow.
questions. Yeah, and I look forward to having you once again, because we have to we have to have one session on remote work and one session on the customer experience management, because I would
Oh,
love to touch
absolutely.
that also. Yeah.
Yeah.
Thank you for joining in, and thank you, viewers, for listening. I'm sure there is so much to take from this session, and I'm sure the insights shared by Valentina can be of really value to you. Thank you, everyone.
Thank you for having me.